Hello, you wonderful people. I am the OBG, and welcome to the OBG show. This 10th of the 3rd, 10th of March, 10/3/26. I was reading 10th of the 3rd, 10th of March, 2026. Hello, I am the OBG, and tonight I'm going to talk about Brandolini's Law and why nonsense spreads faster than truth. But before we do that,
the OBG brought to you by
H.C. Henderson Esquire.
thanks to Tom McCarthy, the OBG show has been running successfully for years. He makes sure it stays online. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so tonight I'm going to talk about Brandolini's Law. And Brandolini's Law, that's well, funny thing is, I don't want to get negative straight away, but why is it every time Europeans say anything, it's a law, and anyone else, it's just something that they said? Anyway, to get back onto it, it's like why nonsense spreads faster, or why lies spread faster than the truth. So this happened back in 2013. It was already in the internet, but the Italian programmer Alberto Brandolini, he coined a phrase that our future has unwittingly walked into. And Brandolini's law, sometimes called the bullshit asymmetry principle, that states that the amount of energy that we need to refute nonsense is an order of magnitude greater than energy needed to produce it. So in simple terms, it's far easier to make a misleading claim than it is to carefully dismantle it. And this is what we're up against when people spread nonsense and lies on social media. And this isn't simply a witty observation about internet arguments neither. It describes modern public discourse to a T. And now that we're deep into the age of social media, political messaging and rapid information exchange, the asymmetry described by Brandolini has become one of the defining problems of all democratic debates. Now, these are the mechanics of Brandolini's law. The law works because creating misinformation is quick and simple. Posting a meme or writing a status takes a few seconds, while correcting it requires patience, evidence, providing sources. Where's your sources? And of course an explanation. And a misleading statement can be thrown out by anybody. But to rebut it properly, someone must examine sources, explain context, and communicate the corrections clearly. And I'm starting to think newspapers are often addressing error and used to just put a simple apology in was simply because they know that it requires work to win over those people who believe the first story, which is another issue. And by the way, humans often accept the initial narrative that they encounter, often overlooking the accuracy of subsequent information. And this phenomenon is supported by research from cognitive psychology, which suggests that familiarity can create a sense of truth. For instance, a study by the psychologist Lynn Hasher demonstrated that repeated exposure to a statement increases the likelihood of it being perceived as true. And regardless of its factual basis, this happens. And a real-life example can be seen in the spread of misinformation during election cycles, where initial claims made by candidates can shape public perception, even when later evidence contradicts those claims. And this tendency highlights the challenges faced in correcting these false narratives once they've taken root in public discourse. And our psychology can worsen the problem because humans tend to remember simple emotional claims more easily than complex corrections. And cognitive scientists often connect this with this illusory truth or effect, and they say that repeated claims begin to feel true simply because they're familiar. Now, the philosopher Karl Popper, someone who I've got a lot of time for, indirectly touched on a related problem in his work on falsifiability. And he says in science, a theory must be testable and open to refutation. But in public debate, many claims are deliberately vague or unfalsifiable, and this means that critics are forced into long explanations while the original claim floats freely, detached from the evidence. Now, Brandolini's law has a place in modern politics. Few areas demonstrate the principle more clearly, in fact, than contemporary political communication. For example, during debates surrounding Brexit, one of the most widely discussed claims appeared on a campaign bus. And the idea was that the UK was spending 350 million a week to the EU using money that could supposedly fund the National Health Service instead. And the statement was brief and emotionally powerful. But economists and journalists spent years explaining why it was misleading, pointing out budget rebates, the structural funds, and the complexity surrounding the EU contributions. And the correction required paragraphs, graphs, financial breakdowns, and the original claim simply fit on the side of a bloody bus. Now, another modern example emerged during the COVID-19 pandemic. In many countries, public health officials had to address waves of misinformation about vaccines, treatments, and the nature of the virus itself. And researchers like Anthony Fauci repeatedly spent hours explaining clinical trials, immune responses, and the statistical risks. Meanwhile, a misleading tweet or video, viral video, could spread globally in minutes. And this isn't to say I support it. This is about what happened during the pandemic. The fact that, like the small bit of information, which worked in our favour in this case, spread, and the explanations didn't. And the disparity is striking. 10 pages required to clear any confusion that's caused by a single sentence. Now, historical events have echoed the same pattern. And although Brandolini named the principle in the internet age, the dynamic's far older. For instance, there was a controversy in France, which I named the Dreyfus Affair, when the Jewish officer Alfred Dreyfus was accused of treason. Newspapers spread dramatic accusations and conspiracy theories, and these claims travelled quickly through pamphlets and through headlines and, through the people and so on. And correcting them required painstaking investigation, including intellectuals such as Emile Zola, who wrote long, detailed rebuttals, and most famously, his open letter j'accuse, a phrase I use sometimes. That's where I got it from, by the way. And Zola had to lay out evidence, legal arguments, and political analysis simply to counter claims that had been shouted in slogans. And this is a problem that we're faced with today. Short accusations, long corrections. And another historical case comes from the scientific world when Charles Darwin published on the origin of species, which critics often misrepresented his theory of evolution with caricatures like humans descended from monkeys. And Darwin and other biologists spent decades clarifying the history of natural selection, evolutionary branching, and genetic inheritance. And the simplified misinterpretation spread easily and rapidly. And the accurate explanation required entire textbooks. And I even had to dive into Darwin's theory and was astonished at how much I didn't know about it. It's also used by racists and elitists, by the way, bastardised, we come from monkeys and survival of the fittest to suit their own agendas. So, the symmetry persists, and the reasons being, I'll give you 3 or 4 reasons, okay. 1, simplicity beats complexity. False claims can ignore nuanced truth, can ignore the truth, whereas using the long term can't. Emotional appeal spreads faster, and this includes anger, fear, or outrage, and it encourages sharing, this is on social media, before verification. And this is the most common cause of our social media, like woes. Attention, the attention that the algorithms use, this is a kind of attention economy, it's called, I've seen places. They reward speed, and social media algorithms amplify engagement, not accuracy, which is the reason social media algorithms tend to encourage this and propagate that more. And corrections really travel as far. So by the time a myth has spread and gone as far, the corrections are catching up, and people don't dwell on the conflicts that have happened previously. They just hold on to the very first idea that they heard to. And psychologist D'Angelo Kahneman described something related in his work on cognitive bias. In Thinking Fast and Slow, which was the name of the book, he explains that human thinking often defaults to fast, intuitive judgments. Complex corrections require slower analytical reasoning, something that people don't always engage in. So, can Brandolini's Law be overcome? Well, while the asymmetry can't be eliminated entirely, several strategies can reduce its impact. First, pre-bunking, and that means explaining common misinformation tactics before people encounter them, and this can build resistance. Researchers such as Sander and Vander I forget the name, excuse me, Sandern Van Linden, okay? Yeah, I'm going to have to put the correction in the comments. They've shown that teaching people how manipulation works can make them less susceptible to false claims. However, this prevention is better than cure solution requires education. The very thing that empowers Brandolinis Law is the lack of this. Second, institutions must communicate clearly and quickly, because when experts speak only in technical language, misinformation fills the gap with simpler stories. It's another human trait. And media literacy, that's crucial. Citizens who understand how narratives are constructed are less likely to accept dramatic claims without evidence. But who wants to bother to learn media literacy? Certainly not the quick-hit scrollers. So, Brandolini's Law reveals a frustrating truth about human communication. Nonsense is cheap, but truth is expensive. Careless claims travel the world in seconds, while the correction must patiently walk behind it, burdened by the weight of footnotes and evidence. What are we going to do about it? I am the OBG.
OBG.